there. For more on what's going on, I want to bring in James Rosen. He's a chief White House correspondent for Newsmax and the author of the biography Scalia. Sir, good to have you with us.
Great to be back with you, Vince.
What was happening yesterday? You noticed some things about President Biden's remarks yesterday that I hadn't seen anyone else point out. But once I looked closely, I said, James Rosen's correct. What's happening here?
Well, I don't pretend that these were my unique observations, but it was clear to me, watching President Biden's remarks from Camp David last night, not only that his diction was poorer than usual, but that he also was sporting some mysterious injuries to his face. He had a cut on his lower lip, a bruise on his chin, and a slight disfigurement to his jawline, all of which suggested that the 82-year-old incumbent either sustained a fall or some other kind of hard impact to his face.
Yeah.
I made inquiries of the White House today, and of course, there was no response.
Meaning that you don't expect responses from them because of your relationship with them, but they just refuse to talk to them, or just this topic would keep them away from it?
Between the two of those factors, the outcome is fairly well assured, Vince.
So I don't even know what to conclude from that. They just don't like you? Is that it?
Because they don't like me. They don't generally cooperate with me. And also, this is a sensitive subject, one which is not going to look good for the president, no pun intended, no matter what they would say back to me. So they chose to ignore it.
Well, you know, the amazing thing, of course, about your relationship with the White House is you were asking all the right questions, the answers to which we unfortunately get much later. And the revelation was that the White House lied to us. So they spent the entire administration insisting that Biden was of sound mind and that they would say things like, "Oh, he's not going to pardon Hunter Biden." And meanwhile, you're asking all the questions about this, and then they finally everyone's admitting, yeah, Biden has poor days. He's got all these White House officials admitting that things aren't going well. I mean, what must that be like? What is that like for you to look back on that and go, hey, I was on the right track, and I was treated like garbage for it?
What you're referring to, for the benefit of our listeners who might not know this, is that in a news conference in the East Room of the White House on January 19, 2022, so not quite fully 1 year into Mr. Biden's term in office, I asked the question of him, and I stated that I was doing so with utmost respect for his life accomplishments and the high office that he holds. But a poll published that very morning in Politico showed that 46% of registered voters disagreed with the statement Joe Biden is mentally fit, and that not even a majority of Democrats, only 43% at that time, was willing to affirm that statement strongly. And I asked, why do you suppose it is that such large segments of the American electorate have come to harbor such profound concerns about your cognitive fitness? And that was the first, and for about 2+ years, the only question put directly to the president about these mounting concerns. His answer validated the question in a certain sense, because all he said to me was, I have no idea. And he called on the next person. But I was blackballed from asking any questions in any White House setting for 8 months in the person of Jen Psaki and then Karine Jean-Pierre. And I was made to feel rude and fringy by my colleagues in the White House press corps for even asking that question. And lo and behold, we now, with the benefit of time and hindsight, can see that, in fact, I was asking about really what was all along, the core issue of the Biden presidency.
Has anyone apologized to you for your treatment, including your colleagues?
No, I've discerned no apologetic impulses from any members of the White House press corps, but I'm not in it for anybody's apologies or for their kudos, for that matter.
Yeah.
As a reporter, an honest reporter, my chief concern is compiling a more accurate record of our times. I also I was there in Las Vegas at the Mandalay Bay Casino.
Yes.
For what was really President Biden's last campaign appearance on behalf of himself after 52 years of campaigning, and that was at the NAACP convention. And he was struggling, this was July 16, to preserve his place atop the Democratic ticket. And he had already conceded in the wake of his disastrous debate performance against former President Trump that he, Mr. Biden, doesn't walk, talk, or debate like he used to. But as he told the NAACP audience in Las Vegas that day, I know how to tell the truth. And, it's central to his claim on behalf of himself, not only in that instant moment, but over his whole career. And yet, in order to believe that Joe Biden knows how to tell the truth, or if he knows how to tell the truth, that he is usually inclined as a matter of habit or instinct or even self-interest to do so, we would have to overlook an awful lot over an awfully long span of time, going back, for example, to the conclusion of the faculty at his law school that he had plagiarized in law school, his withdrawal in 1987 from his first campaign for the presidency over similar plagiarism accusations. And then you come to even the end of his presidency and the about-face on the pardoning of his son. This strikes me as something that biographers and historians are going to be grappling with for some time, Vince. The essential question about Joe Biden was whether he knew how to tell the truth, and
Yes.
if so, whether he was disposed to do so.
You know, if you can take the long view, few guests can do that quite as well as you can in your knowledge of history. How does there are a lot of politicians, kind of by design, who try and spin the public towards their own policy preferences. That's not unusual, but it seems to me that Joe Biden stands out among American politicians when it comes to deception, and including how brazen it is. How do you view it?
Some people, when they speak falsely or they outright lie, are readily apparent as doing so, and sometimes we choose not even to hold that against them for one or more reasons. In the case of Joe Biden, I think it has been the pattern that he has spoken falsely quite frequently, and yet he has been able to maintain over all these years, perhaps stemming from the tragedy he suffered early in his political career, when his wife and baby daughter were killed in a car crash. He's been able to maintain an image as being the very essence of American small-town decency. And again, historians and biographers are going to reckon with this. But as just one more example, again from late in his presidency, forget the fact that we were told that all of these instances captured on videotape of his increasing debility were cheap fake videos. After he left the presidential race, when he called former President Trump's supporters garbage, he claimed that there was an apostrophe out of place. And yet it was the conclusion of the official White House stenographers who lodged a protest about this, that when they submitted the transcript of those remarks, they had it such that Mr. Biden was indeed calling all the Trump supporters garbage, and that the White House staff overruled their placement of the apostrophe in the release of the official transcript by the White House in order to make it seem less pointed and less of a denunciation of Mr. Trump's supporters. And again, when you're monkeying with the official transcript of the proceedings and the determinations of the official transcribers, that to me, again, seems a very brazen attempt to manipulate the truth.
Yes. Yeah, and in fact, the White House has edited hundreds of the transcripts that President Biden has created with his mouth during his presidency in order to change the meaning of so many sentences. This has just become so common practice by this White House. On the way history treats Biden, I'm curious your thoughts on the fact that Biden has made routine ovations to presidential historians. He always meets with historians. He has them constantly coming by the White House. He's had meetings with Doris Kearns Goodwin and John Meacham and Michael Beschloss, and they're coming over to consult with him. John Meacham's been writing a bunch of his speeches throughout his time in office. John Meacham even decorated the Oval Office. And I kind of wonder, I assume that this is just Biden trying to butter up all the historians so that they write nice things about him?
Well, we have to take issue, Vince, with your wording at the very end of the question. Mr. Biden has not been seen buddying up or buttering up, quote, all the historians. The three that you mentioned, all three of whom I should point out have been very kind to me over the years. Both Mr. Beschloss and Meacham have blurbed my books. Doris Kearns Goodwin has written approvingly of one of my books. But all three of them are unabashedly liberal historians, presidential historians. And so, he was, in a sense, cultivating people whom he already could count on as having been supporters of his. But all presidents like to talk to historians.
Yeah.
All presidents care about history. You don't run for any kind of office if you don't care about history. As for how historians writ large will treat Mr. Biden, part of that will depend on how the second Trump term plays out.
Yep.
If for some reason it turned out to be a failure or disastrous in some sense, then, as has happened with other presidents and former presidents over the passage of time, Mr. Biden might come out looking a little better. But as things stand, anytime you fail to win re-election as a sitting president, there is a kind of patina of failure that settles in over your presidency and over your single term. And that is true even for George H.W. Bush, for example, who presided over the conclusion of the Cold War and the collapse of the Soviet Union. If you run for re-election as a president of the United States and you don't win, history tends to judge you as a failure.
Finally, back to where we started, James Rosen of Newsmax. The injuries to President Biden's face, you've been asking about them. The White House is refusing to answer you. And have you seen any other coverage in any other outlet on this subject?
Not in any mainstream news outlet, no. I would also point out that when President Biden emerged from Marine One on the south lawn of the White House today, having returned from Camp David, and strolled the grass to get into the White House, taking no questions from reporters, he was kept at a greater distance than usual from the press pool that is assembled for such arrivals and departures. And his side of his face showed what appeared to my untrained eye to be a discoloration of some kind. There was no bandage evident, but something clearly happened to the president, and there was similar talk after he left Las Vegas in July, after the appearance that I just mentioned at the NAACP convention, where his face seemed to sport some injuries in the very televised address in which he announced his withdrawal from the presidential campaign.
Yeah, a lot of lies, unfortunately. James Rosen, thank you for constantly trying to get to the truth, and keep up the great work at Newsmax, sir. Great to talk to you today. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year to you, Vince. Thank you.
That's James Rosen, Chief White House Correspondent for Newsmax, the author of the book Scalia.